Welcome to Hiring a Nanny, brought to you by Hand in Hand, the Domestic Employers Network. This section covers a lot of material, so feel free to stop and take breaks. So, before we start, I like to ground this in thinking about our own experiences as workers. So, think about what has been important to you as an employee or as a worker. What has made you feel valued at work? Some of the common responses we get to this fall into these three areas: good communication, clear expectations, good pay, and paid time off, vacation and sick days. So, our best practices are pretty much organized around these categories as well. We'll start with our recommendations for how to create clear communication and expectations, what it means to create fair pay, and paid time off. One thing to note here is the difference between recommendations and laws. And the reason there aren't rules or laws to follow are because they don't really exist federally yet, meaning people get away with a range of employment practices, and domestic workers don't have nearly any workplace protections, which is why we exist. As you can imagine, when there aren't clear guidelines or regulations, workers like nannies are a particularly vulnerable workforce. Thanks to decades of organizing, much of what we've been involved with directly, there's a growing number of cities and states with domestic worker protections. But since that list of states is always changing, and this course serves a national audience, we'll just drop a link of recent legislation here and in the resource index. You can rest assured that no matter where you are in the United States, if you follow our best practices, you will likely be within the law. And in many places, our recommendations will exceed the law. So, for example, although there is a federal minimum wage, there are also state and regional minimum wage requirements. We don't include these various laws because our recommendations to pay a living wage are based on the cost of living for your specific location, and that exceeds even places with high minimum wages. So that's what we mean by our recommendations exceeding the law. We don't focus on doing the bare minimum that you can get away with legally, but instead on building a mutually beneficial relationship with the person who is going to be caring for your children. But big disclaimer here, we are not legal professionals, and this does not constitute legal advice. So as you go through this following part, which sounds like regulations or rules, remember they are not. They are recommendations. Okay, now that we got that stuff out of the way, here's how we recommend setting clear expectations. So, when we say to start at hiring, it's because the relationship starts even before you've hired them in the interview process. Mention when you would plan to hold regular check-ins with them. Also, invite their feedback from the very beginning and make sure they know that these check-ins are as much about letting you know how you are doing as an employer as it is for you to assess how they are doing. What is a work agreement? What if I've never had one before? Don't worry, a work agreement is a written document that outlines responsibilities for both you and the nanny. It helps prevent confusion or misunderstandings later. Your work agreement should also include the basics: schedule, pay, and benefits, but also contingency plans. What if somebody gets sick? An emergency plan, which we'll go over, a confidentiality agreement and social media agreement, which we'll talk more about here, your paid time off policy and any mutually agreed upon holidays, and an evaluation schedule. And if you are like, what the what? I have literally not thought of any of that. Don't worry, we have sample work agreements in English and Spanish, and all of the above is covered in this course and then again in the linked resources. We got you. So, needless to say, the work agreement is also a working document or living document, meaning it doesn't have to feel like it's set in stone. Like, it's okay if the agreement changes because the job can change. However, don't suddenly ask the nanny to do new tasks without prior discussion. Like, if you didn't realize that you really wanted a clean house and dinner in the oven when you got home, don't suddenly ask the childcare provider to roast a chicken and set the table. If you have a one-off request, explain why you are asking them to do it this one time. And if this is going to become a regular part of their job, talk it through with them. If they agree to it, add it to the work agreement. Regular check-ins. These help set the tone by starting to have your check-in meetings early in the working relationship and by setting the standard of doing them often. Remember to schedule these short meetings when both of you have time, and ideally this would be outside of work hours and paid. Together, you can outline action plans and next steps that you would like to address together. Good communication isn't a one-time thing, and these aren't really rules as much as guidelines to get you both in the habit of having open communication, however that works best for you. Showing your appreciation. Remember that nannies are working in a home all day and often get very little feedback from the outside world. Because of this, any criticisms can loom large. So just remember to appreciate them as well. Be sure to include this in any check-in you have. Spend some time in informal conversation with the nanny. Try to make time at the start or end of your day. It's a good way to get to know each other and to get comfortable with each other. It's a good opportunity to share information about your child and to talk about things that are going on with them. Often we are busy and plan to the minute, like, okay, she gets here at 8, so I'll leave for work at 8:05, but it's great to leave a little bit more room if possible. Remember, good communication does take practice. Annual evaluations. Ideally, your written work agreement will specify that evaluations take place annually. Bringing up a job evaluation out of the blue can be alarming. If you don't have a written agreement, you can say something like, I'd like to plan time for a job evaluation every so often. It'll be a chance for us to check in and give each other feedback. We'll focus on what's working and what could improve. Look ahead together. An evaluation meeting is a good opportunity to discuss the future. You can each discuss any big changes that are coming up. Annual meetings also often culminate with a pay increase. A domestic worker's pay can and should be increased for many reasons, including a change in responsibilities or a change in the hours worked each day. Or you could offer a raise based on the length of employment or a change in the cost of living or inflation. We'll talk about that a lot more in depth in our fair pay section. Confidentiality, social media, nanny cams. So, confidentiality is not a given. We all want to protect our confidentiality and privacy, including in the nanny and family relationship. Ask for a commitment from the nanny that they will not disclose any private information obtained about you, such as medical, financial, legal, and career information, and include that in your work agreement. You can stipulate that no pictures of your children be shared on any social media network, and at the same time, commit to respecting the nanny's right to their own privacy. We get questions about nanny cams sometimes, and understandably, people want to make sure that their children are safe. That said, we don't recommend nanny cams as they could erode trust with the nanny. If you do decide to use some sort of surveillance, just make sure that you discuss it with them first. Wow, okay, so clear expectation actually takes a lot of work. Now let's talk about fair pay. What do we mean by fair pay? Pay a living wage, pay for overtime, and pay reliably. The bulk of this section is really about how to figure out a wage. It may seem pretty straightforward, but there's a lot to unpack here. How much does it cost to hire a nanny? When considering an hourly rate, it really depends on where you are. Keep in mind the cost of living, sometimes called COLA, to determine a fair and family supporting wage. After all, many nannies are mothers and family caregivers themselves. The hourly wages for one child in a high-cost living city are around $25 to $30 for one child, $28 to $35 an hour for two children, and a nanny share rate is around $35 to $45 per hour. So for example, $40 between two families would be $20 per family in a nanny share. These rates have changed a lot, and they continue to. One of the reasons we use the living wage calculator is from one year to the next, pay rates really jump with inflation. For example, currently the MIT cost of living calculator says the living wage for a single person in Phoenix is about $18 an hour. In Kingston, New York, the living wage is $17 an hour, and it's $23 an hour in San Francisco. You can click the link here or find it in the resource index to verify this. Okay, seems easy, just pay that, right? But if you look at a household with 2 working adults and 1 child, here's how much someone would have to make to cover their basic living expenses. $20 in Phoenix, Arizona, $21 in Kingston, New York, $28 in San Francisco. So this can be a helpful guide in trying to figure out what a fair wage is for who you are hiring and where you are. Bottom line is, we don't actually recommend asking around for pay recommendations because the going rate is often not the appropriate rate to pay. And if someone asks you what a fair rate is, you can send them our way. So, progress, not perfection. As we talk about our fair pay suggestions, I want to acknowledge that some of these practices may seem out of reach. If you feel that tension arise as you listen here, know that you are not alone and that we each make our best efforts to do what's right for our families, while still respecting the humanity of the person caring for our kids. We are hoping for progress, not perfection. Sometimes people realize that hiring a nanny may be out of reach financially. There are many options which we do not cover here for childcare, but you can explore nanny shares, part-time care, daycare centers, childcare referral services, and subsidized programs. So that was a lot to chew on. The rest of fair pay is a bit more straightforward. Aside from paying a living wage, pay for overtime. Domestic workers are typically hourly workers to ensure that overtime pay can be calculated and that their labor is not exploited. Overtime exists because the risk of accidents and mistakes increases. The U.S. Department of Labor defines overtime as being worked at over 40 hours weekly or 8 hours daily. Each overtime hour should be paid at 1.5 times the hourly rate. For example, someone earning $20 an hour would get $30 per overtime hour. Other options. What if you employ a nanny for a high number of hours and cannot afford pay or the nanny is not available? One option is to employ multiple workers, possibly a daytime provider and a nighttime provider. Another option is to enter into a nanny share agreement to share the costs of overtime with other family. Finally, pay reliably. This one is short, sweet, and simple, but it's really important to pay on time. Having a timesheet may help. Set all the calendars and alarms to remember. Okay, so maybe pay reliably didn't need its own section, but we made it through fair pay. Hopefully we answered a ton of questions for you, and I know it really opened up my eyes when I first took the course and helps me check myself and my own employment practices to make sure I'm still keeping up with this stuff. So now onto our last set of best practices around paid time off. We are in the home stretch, just a few more minutes. It's a good time to stand and look out a window or whatever they say to do when you've been looking at a computer for too long. Truly, thank you for still being here. So, if you've never worked in human resources before, welcome to the exciting world of benefits management. Here's how time off should work in each of these situations. So, let's dive in. Sick days. For a full-time nanny, offer at least 5 paid sick days each year. If the nanny works part-time, they should earn 1 hour of sick time for every 40 hours worked. For a part-time nanny, a day off is defined as the average number of hours the nanny is contracted to work per day. So let's say a nanny works 5 days a week for 4 hours each day, from 9 to 1 p.m. When they request a Monday off, they will use 4 hours of PTO to take that day off. They're paid as if they worked that day. For a full-time nanny, offer at least 2 weeks of paid vacation each year. For part-time, they should earn 1 hour of vacation time for every 20 hours that they've worked. Nannies start earning their vacation time from their very first day on the job. But it's reasonable to ask the nanny not to use this time during their first 3 months. Vacation time should be scheduled in advance, ideally a month or more, together. Many employers want their vacation schedules to line up with the nanny's, and that is a request you can explore, but the nanny has the right to choose when they want to take a vacation. Unused vacation time can roll over from year to year. But employers may cap the vacation accrual, for example, at 15 days total. At the end of the job, any vacation time the nanny has earned but not used should be paid out to them in full. Holidays. What national holidays should the nanny get to take off? Provide 9 paid holidays on the same holidays that schools, banks, and probably your own office are going to be closed. Christmas, New Year's Day, July 4th, Labor Day, Thanksgiving, Martin Luther King Day, Memorial Day, Juneteenth, and President's Day. If you ask them to work and they agree, pay a holiday rate of 1.5 times their regular pay. The nanny may also prefer to take off a different holiday, like Eid instead of Christmas. You can work out which specific holidays work for you and the nanny, as long as the total number is at least 9 for the year. Nannying can certainly be an intense job, and workers are entitled to rest breaks during the day. However, it's not possible for the nanny to go off duty while alone with your child, right? Do what you can to ensure the nanny has opportunities to take care of themselves. If they can take some time to rest while the child is out napping, it is absolutely a paid lunch hour. Don't expect them to eat a sandwich with one hand while folding onesies with the other. All right, we are done with paid time off. Gentle reminder that I know this seems like a lot to manage, and if you're having feelings come up about how it may be hard to provide all of these benefits, or if you don't receive all of these benefits even from your own employer, we hear you and your frustration. All right, so that concludes our best practices section. You can find the links I mentioned and more in the resource index below. Now, on to the next part of our class, getting ready for Nanny and all of those resources. We hope you found this information useful. If so, please support our work and consider making a donation at domesticemployers.org/donate.